Good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels, and yes, we're getting to the Social Security series, but before we do, real quick, I'm gonna go ahead and turn my kitchen light on so I don't look like some weird, glowy person that's getting ready to be abducted by aliens. So just give me a second. Be right back. Alright, there we go. Now I look slightly more human. Alright, before we get started on our Social Security series, folks, we're going to go over the brief disclaimer and the trigger warnings. So, folks, while we are doing the entirety of this Social Security and Supplemental Security Income series, all pertinent links in regards to all the information we'll be going over throughout the series you're going to find it right there in the description box for you. So should you ever like to go ahead and do a deep dive on your own, I definitely encourage you to go ahead and do so, alright? Trigger warnings. Alright folks, we do have the channel marked not for kids for a reason. Some of the topics we cover on this channel, like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center, Circle of Hope, Agape Boarding School for Boys, or Tobin World. And we also, of course, use profanity on the channel as well. So if your child's 16 and younger and watching this, parental supervision is advised. Also, this is amateur hour. I do not know how to edit these videos to save my soul, and I do frequently often have different types of allergy problems. If you hear me clear my throat, have to turn away from you all for a second, or if I sneeze, I apologize for that in advance. It takes a long time to make these videos, even though I don't know how to edit them, and I really don't like doing the videos over and over again. It's not fun. So, I apologize for that as well. And one more. If you are gung-ho MAGA GOP, or if you are gung-ho Democrat, if you are gung-ho anything, I am not. More than likely at some point there's going to be something I'm going to say that is probably going to offend you. I just feel like it would be fair to go ahead and warn you of that up front. Alright? When you're on Team Facts and Reason, it's its own team. Okay? It tends to not really fall on one political side or the other. So there you are. Alright. And we did leave off last week on Thursday because it turned out that this information we're going through here was a little bit longer than I anticipated. So we're going to go ahead and pick up where we left off last time. We're going to go over what does disabled mean for an adult. And just so I can help individuals know just how full of crap Evil Phil Hartman, also known as Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, how much of an idiot he is. Okay? So easy to get this stuff. Good. Anyway, let me continue where we left off. If you are age 18 or older, we may consider you disabled if you have a medically determinable physical or mental impairment, including emotional or learning problem, which results in inability to do any substantial gainful activity. We'll be going over that here in just a moment because that's important, especially when determining eligibility for people who are developmentally disabled. One would think that would be easy. You get a diagnosis, surely you get in. No. Not at all. I wish to God back in the day that it had been that easy, but no. can be expected to result in death, or has lasted or can expected to last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months. So, nothing extremely short term. Social Security is committed to providing benefits quickly to claimants whose medical conditions are so serious that their conditions clearly meet disability standards. We went over this a little bit last week. We're going to go over it again just to kind of remind you, and then we'll get into the substantial gainful activity. Compassionate allowances, also known as CAL, are a way to quickly identify diseases and other medical conditions that, by definition, meet Social Security standards for disability benefits. These conditions primarily include certain cancers, adult brain disorders, and a number of rare disorders that affect children. The CAL initiative helps reduce waiting time to reach a disability determination for individuals with the most serious disabilities. By incorporating cutting-edge technology, the agency can easily identify potential CAL to quickly make decisions. SSA receives information from the public advocacy groups, comments received from the Social Security and Disability Determination Services communities, counsels from medical and scientific experts, research with the National Institute of Health, and information received from past public outreach hearings regarding potential CAL conditions. All right. Now, we are going to what they mean by inability to do any substantial gainful activity. Because it's a little bit more complicated than what it sounds like. So, what is SGA? We use the term substantial gainful activity to describe a level of work activity and earnings that is both substantial and gainful. SGA involves performance of significant physical or mental activities, or a combination of both. For your work activity to be substantial, you do not need to work full-time. Work activity performed on a part-time basis may also be SGA. Now, a lot of folks that I know that are on Social Security or Supplemental Security income also have part-time jobs. I also know of individuals who go to the sheltered workshops because they want to keep that minimum of how much they're allowed to have in their bank accounts down so they won't be penalized from Social Security and will be able to receive the entirety of their checks. When I said it's more complicated than it sounds, you all have no idea. Alright, if your impairment is anything other than blindness, earnings averaging over $1,550 per month or $2,590 for blind individuals for the year 2024 genuinely demonstrate SGA. Now, God, I'm going to sound old. Back in my day. But back in my day, you could not have over the amount of $900 in your bank account at any given time. Because if you did, they would either take back a certain amount of money out of your bank account because they feel like they overpaid you. I literally, within a span of 6 years, had that happen to me at least once every single year. And considering I wasn't even pulling like Wayfair level money at the time from part-time jobs, it put me in the red every time. Every time. I don't know about you, but if you're living paycheck to paycheck, that red mark is like one of the most frightening things on planet Earth. And to have an agency that can just rip in there and grab it and take it out before you even know what happened, scary. And still a common practice. So anyone who just thinks that we're just living high off the hog off of Social Security, God bless you. I wish everybody had that level of privilege where we didn't necessarily need this level of knowledge in regards to Social Security. But please don't speak on these matters unless you read into it well. Alright, I don't wish you ill, but please, before you speak on these things, evil Phil Hartman, actually do your research and talk to individuals who actually really desperately need their Social Security and what all that entails to keep before you open your mouth. Please, I'm begging you here. Alright, now, what is gainful work activity? That is work performed for pay or profit. Work of a nature generally performed for pay or profit. Work intended for profit whether or not a profit is realized. For SSI purposes, the SGA provision in initial eligibility cases does not apply to blind individuals. So, when I was started, I had to show, God, I can't even remember. Nope, that's Medicaid, sorry. So substantial gainful activity. If you can prove that due to your disability that you are unable to be able to get and maintain a job that is full-time with their own medical benefits, that's the sort of thing that they're talking about here. And the government is clever, folks. Let me explain what I mean by that. Say you have a job like I did with the state. We're going to travel back to 2008. Okay? So I was working at the state at my regional office, Southwest region of the Division of Developmental Disabilities. I only worked part-time. To get even more specific, unless it was conference season, or unless it was when, as a group, co-workers from the regional office needed to go and do some unannounced visits to some group homes or day centers due to concerning reports. I was only working about 4 hours a day. 4 hours a day. However, since I was working for the state, and the majority of the individuals that worked in that office all worked full-time. And because of my advocacy during the time, my position came full-time for everybody else throughout the state, but literally me. Because my office refused to make it a full-time position. I'm sure they had their reasons, but I'm still a little bitter about it, not gonna lie. That meant that they could take me off of Social Security. And they did. In 2008, they took me off of my Social Security. They took me off Medicaid, and they took me off of food stamps. Now, my Social Security payments that I was receiving a month was $650 max every month. Now, I know we all have kind of memory issues considering what the last few years have been like, but even back in that time, that was not a whole lot of money. I was paying about $425 for rent back then, which ate up the majority of the check. So, to do wonderful things like continue to eat, yeah. Hence, you see the issue, right? Yeah. You see, it's not just difficult to get onto Social Security, it's difficult to stay on Social Security. Which is why, when that happened, I had to leave the state and take an actual full-time position. Because $650 a month, even during that time, was not gonna cut it. But let me go ahead and go further on. How long does the medical decision take? The time frame can vary widely, but the decision usually takes 6 to 8 months from the date of application. Now, and they told me this out the gate. They're not going to tell you on the website, but I will. Usually, your first application gets denied straight out the gate. I was literally told by multiple people they always deny your first application. You should follow it up with an appeal as filed through a lawyer's office. So that's what we did. It took 2 years, and then they went again and put me on it for during that time. But the original review does take about 6 to 8 months. Individuals with CAL conditions may receive a decision on their claim in a matter of weeks instead of months or years. See what I'm saying? Some of it waiting for years. The waiting lists are, by the way, especially right now, completely insane. It can vary depending on several factors, but primarily on how quickly we obtain medical evidence from a medical source, whether a medical examination is necessary in order to obtain evidence to support the claim, and if the claim is randomly selected for quality assurance review of the decision. Sometimes we can make a presumptive disability or blindness determination and start paying you while you're waiting for the DDS to make a final determination. See expedited payment for information. Now, that didn't exist during my particular time when I was going through all of that. I'm happy to see it now, but holy crap, would that have been nice back in the day. Good God. Now, continue to read here. We're going to go through this entire section, it looks like. Who decides if I am blind or have a disability? After helping you complete your application, the Social Security office will review to make sure that you meet the basic non-medical requirements for disability or blindness benefits. Then the Social Security office will send your application to the DDS office in your state. The DDS will decide whether you are disabled or blind under Social Security law. The DDS will consider all the facts in your case. They will consider what your doctors or other sources have said about your impairments, when it began, how it limits your activities, what the medical tests have shown, and what treatment you have received. They will use medical evidence from your doctors and from hospitals, clinics, or institutions where you have been treated, and all other information they have about your condition. The DDS looks at the information you have given us. They also review your medical records, information about how you are functioning, and if applicable, your work history, and then decides if you're disabled or blind for SSI purposes. Now, difference between SSI and SSA. SSA is normal Social Security, what you pay into each month with your checks. SSI, Supplemental Security Income. If they cannot make a determination based on the information they have, DDS will schedule a special medical examination or test for you and will pay for this examination or test. They may pay for your travel expenses to this examination or test. It is important that you go to the special medical examination or test if one is scheduled. If you do not keep the appointment, the DDS could deny your claim. So, they do that. If you ever need that, there's their link to what they mean by that special testing. In deciding if you are disabled, the DDS team uses a process called the sequential evaluation process. So what is the sequential evaluation process? If you appear to meet all of the non-medical eligibility requirements, income, resources, residency, citizenship, we use a step-by-step process to determine if you are disabled. These steps are called the sequential evaluation process. The following sections describe how we use the sequential evaluation process for adults and children. Sequential evaluation for individuals age 18 or older. Are you working? Step 1. If you are performing substantial gainful activity, we cannot consider you to have a qualifying disability. And the sequential evaluation process is here. We make this decision in your local Social Security office. We generally consider earnings over $1,550 per month or $2,590 for blind individuals effective January 2024 to be SGA. If you're not performing SGA, we will send your case to DDS for a determination concerning your impairments. We refer to the DDS as we in the following sections because Social Security uses the DDS to decide whether you are disabled according to the Social Security's definition of disability. Step 2, do you have a severe impairment? If you're not performing SGA, we then decide whether you have medically determinable physical or mental impairments. We need objective medical evidence to establish a medically determinable impairment. Next, we decide if your medically determinable impairments or combination of impairments is severe, as impairment is considered severe if it is significantly limits your physical or mental ability to do basic work activities. This is particularly important, folks. It also functions inside applying for Medicaid as well. Example of basic work activities, physical functions such as standing, walking, sitting, lifting, pushing, pulling, reaching, carrying, or handling. Seeing, hearing, speaking, understanding, remembering, and carrying out simple instructions, using judgment, responding appropriately to supervision, coworkers, and usual work situations, dealing with changes. If your impairment is not severe, we will find that you are not disabled. If your impairment is severe, we will go to the next step. Step 3, do you have an impairment that meets or medically equals a Social Security listing? If your impairment is severe, we decide if it meets the medically equals criteria in our listing of impairments. The listings, you are disabled if you have an impairment that meets the criteria of one of the listings or medically equals the criteria of one of the listings. We determine if your impairment meets one of the listings by comparing it to the specific requirements in the listings. It is not enough to have a diagnosis that is named in the listings. All right, did you hear that, evil Phil Hartman? Let me say that again. It is not enough to have a diagnosis that is named in the listings, which means we don't automatically get a check just because we get a diagnosis. Got that? Got that, evil Phil Hartman? Do you? We determine if your impairment medically equals one of the listings, if it is at least equal in severity to any listed impairment. Your impairment meets or medically equals the requirements of a listing and meets 12 months duration requirement, we will find you disabled and the process ends here. If your impairment is severe but you do not meet or medically equal a listing, we can still find you disabled at a later step in the process. We decide the most you are physically and mentally able to do despite limitations resulting from your impairments. We call this residual functioning capacity, RFC assessment. How much can you work, can you do part-time? Because you can work part-time and still receive money unless you go over a certain amount in your bank account more than once, which is what happened with me. Step 4. Are you able to do your past work? We next consider whether, given your RFC, you are physically and mentally able to do any job that you did in the past, generally the last 15 years. At step 4, we do not consider whether you can get a particular job, but whether you can do a particular job. If you can do work you did in the past, we will find you do not have a qualifying disability. If you cannot do your past work, we consider the 5th step of the sequential evaluation process. Step 5, can you do any other kind of work? Step 5, we consider your RFC limitations, vocational factors as age, education, work experience, and work existing in the national economy. Generally, your ability to do other work is greater if you are younger, have more education, or have learned transferable skills in previous work. If you cannot perform other work that exists in significant numbers in the national economy, we will find that you have a qualifying disability. Alright. Sequential evaluation for children or individuals under the age of 18. We'll go into this here just a little bit because a lot of folks begin looking into this when they're 16, when they're in high school and they're just beginning transition age services, going from child services and supports with the public school system into transferring over into a more adult-like services and supports. I know that sounded weird, I apologize. Okay. Sequential evaluation. Step 1 is the child working. If a child is working performing SGA, we cannot consider the child disabled, and sequential evaluation process ends here. Your local Social Security office determines whether a child is performing SGA. So we're talking about, you know, those part-time fast food jobs a lot of us got in high school. That's what they're referring to here. Part of the reason I managed to get Social Security in the first place because that was about around the time where my legs started spasming constantly, all the time. Constant involuntary muscle movement there. If I didn't have that, I would have been SOL. I can tell you that now. We define SGA for children in the same way that we define it for adults. And we already went over that. Does the child have a severe impairment? If the child is not performing SGA, we will determine if the child has a medically determinable physical or mental impairment, or combination of impairments established by the objective medical evidence. Pardon me? Hereafter referred to as impairments, and whether it is severe. An impairment is not severe if only a slight abnormality or a combination of slight abnormalities that cause no more than minimal function limitations. The child does not have a medically determinable impairment, or the child has a medically determinable impairment but is not severe, we will find that the child does not have a disability. If the child has a severe medically determinable impairment, we will go to the next step. Alright, step 3. Does the child's impairment meet or medically equal a listing or functionally equal the listings? Sorry folks, I know I'm starting to lose my voice here. If the child's impairment is severe, then we decide if it meets or medically equals a listing. A child with a disability has an impairment that meets the criteria of one of the impairments in the listings, medically equals the criteria of one of the listings, functionally equals the listings. We determine if a child's impairment meets one of the listings by comparing it to specific requirements in the listings. It is not enough to have a diagnosis that is named in the listings. We determine a child's impairment medically equals one of the listings if it is equal in severity to any listed impairment. If a child's impairment meets or medically equals a listing and meets the duration requirement, we will find the child has a qualifying disability. The child's impairment is severe but does not meet or medically equal a listing. We determine whether the impairment functionally equals the listings. This means that we evaluate the effects of the impairment on the child's ability to function at home, at school, and in the community. We will consider factors such as how well the child can initiate and sustain activities, how much extra help the child needs, and the effects of structured or supported settings. how the child functions in school, the effects of the child's medications or other treatment. Once we have a clear picture of a child's functioning in all activities and settings at home, at school, and in the community, we consider how evaluate the child's functionings in these activities in 6 domains. These domains are broad areas of functioning intended to capture all of what a child can or cannot do. The domains we use are acquiring and using information, attending and completing tasks, interacting and relating with others, moving about and manipulating objects, caring for yourself, health and physical well-being. If a child's impairment results in marked limitations in 2 of these domains of functioning, extreme limitation in one domain, then their impairments functionally equals the listings. We define marked and extreme limitations in several ways in our rules. The most general definition of a marked limitation in a domain is when a child's impairment interferes seriously with the child's ability to independently initiate, sustain, or complete activities. An extreme limitation in a domain is where the child's impairment interferes very seriously with these abilities. All right, folks. So if you can see that, kind of puts the lie to Evil Phil Hartman's idea of just how easy it is to defraud Social Security or supplemental security income. Which means it isn't. To even get considered and get through the front door in regards to these programs, you have to come in with receipts. Not just simple receipts. You can't just bring in your diagnosis paperwork and bang, they give it to you. No, as you just seen, we went through the entirety of the eval process for both adults and kids to get in regards to what they use to determine whether or not you qualify for Social Security or supplemental security income. Okay? Yeah. Easy my ass. Alright? It's not as simple as just, like Evil Phil Hartman said, just sitting down, collecting money from the government in your mom's basement playing video games just because you don't want to work. And that's why we gotta cut all this, it's all fraud. Is a bunch of lying nonsense. Evil Phil Hartman doesn't know what he's talking about. Nor does the majority of the GOP that are actually willing to sign off on this monstrosity of a bill. That's why we're kind of doing these series and why I wanted to go over eligibility criteria in particular. Because the way they paint it, oh, people just use it left, right, and center, they can get it whenever they want. These people have never dealt with Social Security in their entire existence. Okay? And it shows. So please, folks, to anybody else who want to tell you about how easy it is to defund programs such as Social Security, feel free to link this article, link this video, or even another video going over the same information. I am not picky, nor do I feel the need to be famous. God knows. I already have stalkers for being big fish in a little pond. I don't need any more. I've already had weird people show up my doors. Don't need it, don't want it. As long as the information gets out and we stop this bill, that's pretty much all I care about. Alright, we're going to go ahead and close on that one, folks. We don't get very many views on this channel, and the few we do tend to get removed from time to time. So if you could do me a favor, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and please don't forget to hit the comments. I definitely do appreciate your time, and as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea absolutely do hope you have a good one. I will see you all tomorrow. Now, make sure you're still subscribed so that you can receive an alert when we get our next episode of the Down the Rabbit Hole series out tomorrow. Bye-bye, everyone.